are you folks? Dave Brown here with the new Populist. Thank you for joining me again. So we finally have real progress and perhaps eventually bringing this Russia-Ukraine war to an end. We have Marco Rubio leading a delegation in Saudi Arabia where they have met with the Russians, and we are beginning this process of potentially normalizing relations and negotiating an end to this war in Ukraine. Now, this has garnered a lot of different responses from the international community, specifically in Europe, where the European leaders are not particularly happy. In fact, some of them are just downright losing their minds. In particular, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, he has said that perhaps the UK would actually place troops in Ukraine to help preserve democracy against the evil Vladimir Putin. So the Europeans are not very happy about this, and neither are the neocons who, if you go on X, Twitter, they are breathing venom right now and are very upset that Donald Trump is keeping his promise and trying to negotiate an end to this war. Now, one thing I haven't seen is anyone look at this war from a more scholarly perspective. What does the literature say about this conflict? What does international relations say about this conflict if we look at the different theories for why conflicts arise? Because there's actually two models that we can look to try to understand better why this conflict has occurred. And these two models are the spiral model and the deterrence model. So I want to walk through these models and see if we can really identify the different factors that have led to this proxy war between Russia and Ukraine. So let's start with the deterrence model. And what does the deterrence model say? It says conflict arises from appeasement in the false expectation it will elicit better behavior. It does the opposite and encourages more bad behavior. So the threat of punishment works better in this case. So that is the deterrence model. Then you have the spiral model. And this says conflict arises from punishment applied in the false expectation it will elicit better behavior. It does the opposite and encourages more bad behavior. Appeasement in this case could be the better option. So in this Russia-Ukraine conflict, or this proxy war between the United States and Russia, which model applies? Well, it depends. Is the other state, in this case Russia from our perspective, an aggressor or a status quo power? Because the literature says if you have an aggressive power, you apply the stick to stop them. Now, if they are a status quo power that's not looking to change anything drastically, then you use the carrot. You negotiate, and you bring any conflict, potential conflict, to an end. Now, there are other considerations as well. Are the demands of the other state legitimate? Does Russia have a legitimate beef with what happened in Ukraine the last 20 years? How strong is the other state? Is Russia stronger or are we stronger? Is the other state militarized? In the case of Russia, they went into this war, I wouldn't say they were militarized. In fact, they were really struggling when this war first started. And also, will their demands change their calculus? Meaning, if you give in to their demands, will they so drastically change their position that it might encourage them to do something else? So these are all considerations when we look at a conflict to really decide the best action a state should take. Now, let's go back to this issue of Russia being an aggressor or a status quo power, because I think this is the main issue. Is Russia the aggressor, or is perhaps the United States the aggressor, and does Russia have legitimate claims? Well, from the European standpoint, from the British, they think that Russia is the aggressor, and that we are repeating, once again, the example of Hitler and Chamberlain, where Chamberlain appeased Hitler, and then Hitler said, okay, well, if you're going to appease me, I will continue marching on toward world domination. So that is the perspective of Starmer and the British, that this is a repeat of World War II. But is it really? Is Russia really an aggressor? Perhaps it's actually the United States that could be the aggressor. And why could you say that? Why could you say that the United States might be the aggressor? Well, we are the stronger country, right? So that gives us a lot of more power. Post fall of the Soviet Union, we were the sole world power. And any country, if you look back in history, who has a lot of power, they are very likely to abuse that power and try to consolidate their power. And I could point to a lot of behaviors by the United States that might suggest that we are in fact the aggressor, not the status quo power. And what are those things? Well, we have the expansion of NATO. After the fall of the Soviet Union, we kept moving toward Russia. Then we have the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, which we were 100% involved in. And after the Ukrainian government fell, what did we do? We put in 14 CIA spy bases on the Ukraine-Russian border. And then we also placed dozens of biological research facilities in Ukraine. We have the activities of USAID and the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. And both those organizations are getting a lot of attention right now because they are being shut down by Donald Trump. And why? Because it is being acknowledged that these two organizations, specifically the NED, is a cutout for the CIA, and they are used to destabilize countries that the United States does not like. They operate these non-governmental organizations that promote democracy, and what they actually do is promote destabilization against whatever leader we don't like. And we've done it in Georgia, Belarus, Ukraine, and this is why Russia and China have banned these organizations. And then, of course, we have the 2019 RAND paper, which talks about how we would destabilize Russia. And one of the ways it suggests is by giving Ukraine weapons, which of course we have done. And the aim of destabilizing Russia would be for it to collapse the Putin government and perhaps allow the breakup of Russia. So, from the Russian perspective, is this not the act of aggression from the United States? And not just from Russia's perspective, if you're just a neutral party looking at the two, who can you argue is being the most aggressive? And what was the red line for Russia? Because there was never a reaction from Russia as we moved eastward with NATO toward Russia and we were engaging in all of our activities. What was the red line where they said we can no longer appease, we have to act? Well, we know from WikiLeaks, the memo in 2008, written by the former director of the CIA, William Burns, he said in that memo, for the Russian ruling class, Ukraine is a red line. And if we get involved in Ukraine, that might lead to a civil war, which would give Russia or put them in a position where they have to make a decision whether or not to directly intervene in that civil war. Well, that is exactly what happened. Ukraine was the red line. We helped overthrow the government, and then Russia intervened in a civil war there. So, from the Russian perspective, and even from the neutral perspective, we could argue that the United States was in fact the aggressor, not Russia. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. And it's this. An aggressor may not see themselves as an aggressor. So these European leaders, these neoconservatives, they might truly believe that Russia is the bad guy, that Russia is the aggressor, and that we are actually serving peace by standing up against Russia and funding Ukraine. Now, that's being kind to them. I think many of them actually know what we're doing. Some of these neocons who are in think tanks, they are well aware of our activities in Ukraine in 2014. Now, some of your media personalities, they're clueless. For them, history starts in February 2022, and they had known nothing about what happened the previous 10 years. So they're just coming from a place of ignorance. And they've been propagandized over the years to always just hate Russia and assume Russia is always wrong and that the United States is good, Russia's evil. That is the dichotomy, and you should never question it. So, a lot of people are just propagandized. But again, the neocons, the think tank people, what's so insidious about them is they actually know better. They know that we are being the aggressor and that we provoke Russia. And they don't care because they hate Russia. They want to expand U.S. power, and they will do anything to do that, even if it means sacrificing Ukraine in a proxy war that kills hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and wrecks that country for the next 50 years. So, something to think about. Who was really at fault here? Who was really the aggressor? Who really provoked this war? And that being the case, looking at our position, our, behavior of the United States, it's about time that we have an administration in Donald Trump that will actually try to stop this war and realize, as Trump says, that Russia does have legitimate concerns when it comes to NATO and other things. And he just doesn't dismiss what they say as being meaningless, which is what the previous administration, Biden, did. Whatever Putin said, you ignore it, you don't listen to it, and you just call it Russian propaganda. And that, unfortunately, has led to a 3-year-long war, which has killed, again, hundreds of thousands of people and has destroyed Ukraine. So, finally, a new way of thinking, a realistic way of thinking, and one that perhaps recognizes that it's not a good versus evil dichotomy where Putin's the devil and that's it. One where we understand that other powers have concerns that we have to respect and be realistic about. Otherwise, we're going to be in a state of constant conflict, and we will never have a resolution to these wars. So, good that we have a change from the Trump administration. Well, that is it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.